We start with an update in a tragic story from last week where a little boy was killed and a man who called 911, who we now know is his father, confessed on 911 to killing him, saying that he heard voices in his head. That man, a Parma father, his name is Matthew J. Ponomarenko, and he's been charged with aggravated murder in the case. So we now know that the case will go before a grand jury to determine whether it will move forward, and the next court hearing is set for this Friday, April 2nd at 9:45 a.m. 3 News was able to live stream that court appearance from today, so you can see that on WKYC.com. The incident happened last Thursday, March 25th, when that 911 call was made, but 3 News has determined that it will not be airing that audio because it is very graphic and disturbing. The man, Matthew Ponomarenko, describes beating his son, 5-year-old Jax, with a bat, saying that he heard voices in his head at that time. We'll keep you updated as this story develops. Out in Minneapolis, former police officer Derek Chauvin's trial has begun. Opening statements were delivered today from both the prosecution and the defense. As a reminder, Derek Chauvin faces 3 charges: second-degree murder, second-degree manslaughter, and third-degree murder in the death of George Floyd, who was killed on May 25th. So in those opening statements today, prosecutor Jerry Blackwell gave the statement on how he plans to proceed with the state's case against Chauvin. It lasted about an hour. It included bystander video of George Floyd under Chauvin's knee, and he said 929 are the most important numbers in the trial. He was referring to the 9 minutes and 29 seconds when Chauvin knelt on the neck of George Floyd, and he said, "You can believe your eyes that it's a homicide, that it's a murder," while talking to the jury of 14 who will determine whether or not Chauvin will be convicted of those crimes. Now, defense attorney Eric Nelson also delivered his opening statement. He told the jurors that George Floyd ingested drugs when he was detained by police. He focused on pre-existing medical conditions and told the jury that Floyd died due to several factors, including hypertension, coronary disease, and drug intake. He went on to say this: "When you hear the actual evidence and when you apply the law, the reason, and common sense, there will be only one just verdict." Of course, he is referring to hoping that the jury will deliver a not guilty verdict on those 3 charges for his client, Derek Chauvin. And the case has begun to call witnesses. First up was a 911 dispatcher, the person who sent the officers to Cup Foods where the incident took place, and then reported their use of force to a sergeant. Now, in the backdrop of all of this, Minneapolis announced today plans for more 911 operators and a city safety plan. We do have a breakdown of the charges against Derek Chauvin. He is facing 3 charges. Our Verify team put this together. Those charges are second-degree unintentional felony murder, second-degree manslaughter, and third-degree depraved mind murder. Now, many of you know I am an attorney. I'm licensed in Ohio and California, but this is a state law issue. So our Verify team talked with an expert on Minnesota state law. Rachel Moran, who's a professor at the University of St. Thomas Law School in Minneapolis, talked about the charges, and she said, something to remember here is that none of the charges require the state to prove that Derek Chauvin intentionally killed Mr. Floyd. So these charges do not require an intent to kill George Floyd. But the difference in the charges is about his mental state. Here's how that breaks down. For that first charge of second-degree unintentional felony murder, the state needs to prove Chauvin committed a felony, in this case assault, and that assault led to George Floyd's death. This means proving that Chauvin knew he was committing a crime and that he was assaulting Floyd when he died as a result of Derek Chauvin's actions. Now, the charge of third-degree depraved mind murder means the prosecution has to prove that Chauvin caused the death of Floyd with, quote, an act eminently dangerous to others without regard for human life. According to another professor of law in Minnesota, that charge means killing someone while doing something extremely and extraordinarily dangerous. Common examples of this: playing Russian roulette or firing a gun into a crowd. You're not firing at a specific person, but you're doing something that is extremely dangerous without regard to human life. That's similar to third-degree murder, which is killing someone while doing something very risky, but the degree of risk is a little bit less. Now, the maximum sentence in Minnesota for second-degree murder is 40 years in prison. For third-degree murder, it's 25 years in prison. And for manslaughter, it's 10 years in prison. Because of sentencing guidelines in Minnesota, though, for someone with no prior conviction, it would be more likely that those larger charges would be 12.5 years and then 4 years for manslaughter. But if Chauvin is convicted on more than one charge, he will only serve a sentence for the most severe charge. Flipping now to the current health situation, the current director of the Centers for Disease Control says, "Right now, I'm scared." That's a direct quote from the current CDC Director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky. She's warning about the recent trajectory in the U.S. and saying that it's similar to what European countries saw a few weeks ago before a consistent and worrying spike in COVID-19 cases. Dr. Walensky says, "We have so much to look forward to, so much promise and potential of where we are, and so much reason for hope. But right now, I'm scared." Those are words from her today at the White House COVID-19 briefing. She said, "The 7-day average for new COVID cases in the U.S. is up 10%. Hospitalizations are rising, and COVID-related deaths have also increased to an average of 1,000 per day." She said she's got a recurring feeling of impending doom. That's not something that you want to hear from your CDC director. Here's what she went on to say. "I know what it's like as a physician to stand in that patient room, gowned, gloved, masked, shielded, and to be the last person to touch someone else's loved one because their loved one couldn't be there. We are not powerless. We can change this trajectory of the pandemic." And she went on to urge everyone to recommit to public health strategies while the country works to get everyone vaccinated. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the latest numbers that we have on COVID-19 across the globe, across the U.S., and here in Ohio. These first numbers come from Johns Hopkins University. Right now, globally, there have been a total of 127,393,892 reported COVID cases and 2,787,915 reported COVID deaths. Here in the U.S., the total number of reported cases is at 30,283,640, and the total number of deaths is at 549,664. Now let's take a look at Ohio. These numbers come from the Ohio Department of Health. We saw 1,497 new cases in the last day. Now remember, we usually see a smaller number on a Monday, but this is more in line with the numbers that we saw throughout most of the week last week, except for Friday when there was a significant jump in those COVID-19 cases. So we really need to see where those numbers go tomorrow to get an idea of where we're at in terms of if we're having a case spike here in Ohio right now. In the last day, we've seen 103 new hospitalizations in the last 24 hours, and there are now 963 people in the hospital being treated for COVID. Of those, 251 are being treated in the intensive care unit, and we've seen 22 new ICU admissions in the last 24 hours. Now let's take a look at Ohio's vaccination picture. Right now in Ohio, over 16% of Ohioans are fully vaccinated, so either 2 doses of the Moderna vaccine, 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine, or 1 dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. That's almost 1.9 million people, and more than 19,200 people have become completely vaccinated in the last 24 hours. Looking at the people who have started the vaccination process, we're now at over 28%. That's almost 3.3 million Ohioans, more than 31,300 in the last day. And I am happy to say over the weekend, I can now count myself among those people who have started the vaccination process, got the first dose of the Pfizer vaccine. And I can tell you, I felt a little tired, but that was the most severe side effect that I felt. I felt a little bit tired Saturday when I got the shot, a little bit tired on Sunday, feeling just fine today, and really looking forward to getting that second shot in just a little under 3 weeks now. Another thing that happened over the weekend, if you're a UFC fan, you know that our very own Stipe Miocic is no longer the heavyweight champion of the UFC. He lost in UFC 260, knocked out in the second round by Francis Ngannou, and it was a tough one. It was a tough loss for sure. So today, Stipe took to Instagram and he posted a message to his many fans. Here's what he said. He said, "First and foremost, I'm okay. I know that fall wasn't my most graceful fall, but I was unconscious, so it happens." And it really wasn't a graceful fall. It looked really rough the way he hit the ring, hit the octagon when he got that punch. He says, "To my family, friends, and fans, especially Croatia and Cleveland, I love you and I'm sorry. I hate letting you down. To my team, thank you. I know you feel every loss just as much as I do. We win as a family. We lose as a family. Losses aren't fun. They always sting for a while, but that's the beast of this business." Now, there's been a little bit of chatter about, will this be the end of Stipe's fighting career? I don't think so. Here's why. He went on to say, unfortunately, I deviated from my game plan. I felt great coming into the second round. I saw it was beginning to go as planned. He was getting winded. I came in overzealous and unprotected. I wasn't in a good posture to take the hit. He saw the opening and did what any great fighter would do. That was my error. I accept it. It won't happen again. So that right there says to me that Stipe is not giving up. He's planning on getting back in the octagon, because if he wasn't planning on getting back in the octagon, of course it wouldn't happen again, because he wouldn't be fighting again. So I think that's important for us. He also said, lastly, he wanted to congratulate Francis Ngannou and his team on a well-earned victory. He said, Saturday night was your night. Enjoy your victory. Ever the class act, and Stipe, Cleveland is very proud of you. Now, a different sports story. Hue Jackson, you might remember him as the former Cleveland Browns coach who racked up that 3-36 with one tie record while he was with the Cleveland Browns. Well, he went on ESPN Cleveland, and he said that he received a secret contract extension from Cleveland in the middle of that 0-16 season. He said he got a contract extension when the team was at 1 win and 23 losses midway through the season, and he wanted to go public with it, but the Browns didn't want to go public with it. I wonder if they were, potentially hedging their bets there, if this is actually true, as Hue Jackson says it is. He said it was never made public, and he insists that he was actually lied to by the ownership and the team. He said when he got here in Cleveland before the 2016 season, the Browns then tore down the roster in a rebuild, and that resulted in the 1-15 record in 2016 and the 0-16 in 2017. And then he said after general manager Sashi Brown was fired and replaced by John Dorsey, that Jackson remained Cleveland's head coach. Well, he didn't say that. That's just what happened. And that he was ultimately fired after the 2-5-1 start to the season. And he says that's what put him at the center of the blame for that 3-36-1 run that he was there for. And he feels like he became the fall guy because of the timing. So he is sort of blaming that situation on a rebuild and said that he was misled by the Browns leadership. Interesting. Some unanswered questions there. There are also a lot of unanswered questions after Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's interview with Oprah, that 2-hour interview. That's all we saw on TV. It had to be longer because they cut it down for TV, right? Well, that's the topic on my podcast this week, 3 Things to Know with Stephanie Haney. I talk with 2 wonderful ladies who are very well-versed in the royals. I talk with our very own Romney Smith, who is obsessed with the royals and knows everything about them, and also Rachel Bowie, who is the co-host of the Royally Obsessed podcast, which is produced by purewow.com. Great podcast. It was actually previously named the #1 Royals podcast by Town and Country magazine. So we talk all about the unanswered questions. We talk about whether Princess Diana knew that this was coming when she left her 2 prince sons quite a bit of money. We also talk about why Prince Charles would stop taking his son's calls, what the heck the firm is. By the way, I am very anti the firm. You got to listen to that conversation. And also, who was it who asked that question about baby Archie's skin color? So make sure you check that out. It's linked on WKYC.com. I'm tweeting out snippets of it all week. You can see it on our Instagram page and all of that good stuff. And you can find it by going to WKYC.com/3 Things to Know, or just search for 3 Things to Know with Stephanie Haney wherever you get your podcasts. This was a fun one. Okay, before I let you go today, you need to be checking the serial numbers on your $20 bills, because there's a TikTok video that's being passed around. It's got a lot of views, and it claims that if you have a $20 bill with a mismatched serial number, it could be worth $500. Well, our verified team checked this out too, and yes, that's true. One of the people they talked to is Dustin Johnson. He's the vice president of currency auctions at Heritage Auctions, which Heritage Auctions is one of those companies that has those really large-scale, really public auctions. He says at one point they had a piece of money with an error there that sold for $69,000 because of a mismatched serial number. That's the world record for the most expensive sold mismatched serial number piece of currency. It's not just that, though. If there are errors in other ways, you can also sell your money for a lot more than its face value. Here's a very cool one. This is the world record for the most expensive currency error that resulted in a piece of money being sold. This was in January, and it was a $20 bill that sold for $396,000 because it had a Del Monte banana sticker stuck in the middle of it during the printing process. Obviously, I have royals on the mind. So It's possible. Check those $20 bills. All right, that's it for 3 News Now for Monday, March 29th. I'll see you next up on What's New with your trending stories in the Clicking in Cleveland segment. You can watch that at 5 o'clock. You can watch it on your WKYC app. You can watch it on WKYC.com. You can watch it on TV, too. But you can also watch it on Fire TV and Roku. So